Welcome back, subscribers and return viewers. We are going to get right into episode 5, part 2 of my review. What can we say about this? I really want to know who at Amazon in that writer's room came up with all of these absolutely terrible changes. Again, we are going to get into spoilers. If you don't want to hear them, go watch something else. Let's pick back up with Nynaeve and Moiraine in the tower. When Nynaeve went, she did not go alone. Why? Egwene was with her. And very quickly, Nynaeve became an accepted. However, Nynaeve had a problem. She could really only touch the one true source and channel if she was pissed off. But what's portrayed on the show is Moiraine telling Nynaeve that she's not as great as she thinks she is. She's actually greater than that! Especially in comparison to those dumb old smelly boys from Emond's Field. Need I say, this is not Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. Oh, and yeah, there are these other two characters that the show decides to find again. Perrin and Egwene with the traveling people. Of course, where are they going? Yes, you guessed it, the wrong town. Now, who should this wandering, strong, independent female lead, not the traveling people encounter? The Whitecloaks. I hate this show. For some reason, the sadistic, whole baby bird eating, Aes Sedai burning character played by Abdul Salis just comes out and asks, "Have you seen a false dragon?" This leads to one of the more asinine tropes that this show tries to do, because again, this is not about the story. This is about the message. This is about those talking points that every intellectual property that is produced now must shove in our face. We are not being entertained. This is re-education in neo-Marxist intent. Why do I call things out like this? Because it's important to understand why our entertainment has changed. As a matter of fact, this exact same sentiment was completely outlined by a very large YouTuber by the name of Razorfist, and an article has just appeared on the Bounding Into Comics website that goes into detail as to how and why this is permeating our culture. This is why shows like Wheel of Time suck. And so, of course, we get the matriarch of the traveling people pulling a let's lock arms in the civil rights movement style to protect Egwene and Perrin. The way of the leaf against the way of the light. With the predictable response of the patriarchy smashing her in the mouth. This leads to Perrin and Egwene taking off into the woods. Well, there's even more scenes of the not traveling people trying to turn this into a protest. Why? I don't know. Makes no sense to me. Wasn't in the books. Has nothing to do with the story. But it does provide a ham-fisted allegory against the patriarchy and, let's be honest, Christianity. Of course, the Children of the Light find Perrin and Egwene in the woods, and the show makes use of its drone camera to give us 3 horses circling around them, which I guess is supposed to be menacing, but for some reason just looks like a child's carnival ride. That is really who we're dealing with here as far as who is writing and the creative forces behind this entire bastardization. A creative team that is LARPing has qualified enough to take on a work like this. They are brought to the Children of the Light's camp, and Abdul Salis gets a chance to show off those big guns on his biceps. We need to focus on the victimization of Egwene because she is stripped by all those terrible men. Of course, the fetishization of the patriarchy, especially going after those diverse female characters, has to be front and center in the narrative being pushed in the show. And the Children of the Light S&M show proceeds to strip and wash Egwene. I've never seen exfoliation being portrayed with such menace. Why is all of this wasting screen time? And then the S&M beauticians from the Children of the Light put Egwene in what appears to be a hipster wedding dress. For whatever reason, every time Abdul Salas is on screen, he has to be eating something. I mean, don't get me wrong. I respect an individual who has a healthy appetite, but all the time, this guy apparently needs to have a little nosh before he does some gruesome stuff. In this case, it's a flattened piglet. The show is so stupid. Let me guess. This is an anti-meat allegory because apparently we all need to eat bugs to save the planet. Once Egwene is tied to the chair in her hipster wedding dress, the gimp is brought in. Perrin is brought in, bound and gagged, just like in Pulp Fiction. How do you know when your narrative and adaptation are off the rails? You resort to tricks and spectacle like this bullshit. This is all Rafe Judkins. As we've said, Amazon wanted their own Game of Thrones, and by God, they are going to turn Wheel of Time into something that vaguely resembles that. And of course, now we're going to make Abdul Salas a Bond villain. It's got that loosey-goosey, overly friendly manner of a man who is enjoying his pork roast while another man is being tied up to torture. At long last, we get back to the Gimp. Perrin. And I'm going to be honest with you, I fully expected this to go in places that were too horrifying to imagine. Again, think that scene from Pulp Fiction. Instead, Abdul Salas's character just starts to carve on Perrin like he was that piglet that he was just enjoying. Blah, 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 torture, torture, torture. And the allusions to his relation in the story to wolves starts to come out. This is all nonsensical and completely pointless because I guess who needs to develop the true backstory? What it comes down to is, of course, a woman saves the day. Egwene spontaneously just learns to channel while tied up. That enables Perrin to break free and channel his inner wolf and, we hope, beat the living shit out of the Children of the Light. Well, that can happen in intersectional storytelling. No, you can't save a woman if you're a man. The woman has to save herself. Egwene gets all stabby and saves the both of them. They then flee the tent, and we have the world's worst wolf attack. Much in the way of Logain's air quotes 12 dudes that they said was an army come running down a hill. This scene when they escape the camp is comical in its level of somehow these being wolves or somehow this being horrific. Most of the shots are blurry panning around things that do not even show what would have been truly great if they would have been buggered to do some good CGI with wolves. In the books, there was a scene involving Perrin and Egwene in the wilderness after the traveling people with the Children of the Light finding them, where wolves did intervene and where Perrin killed someone to save them both. But really at this point, I'm just probably confusing you if you haven't read the book series. And once again, we get one sentence to convey what took chapters of character building, with Perrin being able to hear the thoughts of wolves. And that's it for Perrin and Egwene in this episode, once again relegated to that B-roll filler with their own story mangled beyond all freaking recognition. Which brings us back to Rand and Mat in the wrong city, not in Camelin like we talked about in part 1. No, they're in Tar Valon. While I went into near autistic detail in part 1 as to what really happened in Camelin, the right place that Rand Matrim are supposed to be, it is important to note again, we are in an inn that had an innkeeper who was friends with Tom the Gleeman, who told Rand to go to the library to get a book. And it is there that we as readers meet arguably one of the best characters in the Eye of the World. The Ogier Loial looks. If this were a community theater play, I would fire the makeup and costume artist that came up with this. The character chosen to play Loial, I think, is actually quite strong. The voice, the mannerisms, they are pretty darn good. But what we get visually, what's a good way to say it, is completely and utterly ridiculous. There were a lot of mannerisms and aspects to Loial's face, eyes, eyebrows, ears, that conveyed a lot of his emotions throughout the book series. Now, of course, another big problem is that Loial is not big enough. I know you only got to spend $10 million per an episode, Amazon, but do you think maybe you could have used some CG to make an Ogier look like they should, meaning so much taller, broader, and imposing while still being gentle? And of course, blah, 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 we have Loial saying things that are not from the books. This was, again, one of those moments I have in each episode where I question what I am doing with my life by committing any time to this show whatsoever. Where did all the money go to make this show look good? And Logain gets a big case of the giggles when he sees Matrim. How and why that should mean anything to anyone who hasn't read the books, I don't know. This Amazon story skipped over everything important from Shader Logoth. Again, we are reminded that this is not the Matrim we knew from the books, because he doesn't give, and I quote, a shit about this prophecy nonsense. Speaking of which, we jump back to the warder Steppin, and this entire made-up backstory, which does not exist anywhere within Robert Jordan's story, is an excellent opportunity for Rafe Judkins to give us that most tired trope of all, the bad dad backstory. Standing in front of a big fire pit, staring at the ring of his now dead Aes Sedai, Kareen Nagashi, who, again, did not participate in what we saw in episode 4 and actually died at the betrayal of another Aes Sedai. More filler with Moiraine and Lan having a conversation that never occurred in the books about an event that never occurred in the books, acting like characters who are not from the books. Now, made-up Steppin goes to see none other than Nynaeve, who's still apparently hiding in Lan's quarters. Nynaeve, of course, doesn't stay in the room and goes to wander the mines of Moria. No, I'm sorry, this is what looks a lot like the architecture from that dwarven underworld city. Landrin shows up, blah, blah, blah. Again, all of this is made up. And yes, it is talking shit about Mentime again. Blah, blah, blah. Murder the story, start jamming crap where it doesn't belong, and poof! Loial found Nynaeve. So Nynaeve can just come and go from the top. Oh, God. This show sucks. Can anyone even just try and pretend that they're trying to string together a vaguely coherent narrative? Meanwhile, back at Hogwarts, the tower, more one-sentence exposition dumps, and Landrin can't help herself. She has to put the moves God, on Moiraine. We can't even begin to pretend to represent the true animosity that occurred between the Reds and the Blues for nearly 2,000 years. After drinking too much, Lan finds what appears to be a suicide note from Steppin, and then there's lots of slow motion running down hallways. And of course, Lan finds him having cut his wrists in a corner on his knees with a pool of blood. Why? Because we need grim, dark suicide from a character who was not articulated in the actual book, because, again, Amazon is trying to make the story into Game of Thrones. Jump to the Tower Men's Choir funeral for Steppin, where Lan is obviously in distress. Really, would it have been so hard to just make a good show about one book, The Eye of the World, and give us the actual story so that we could have a little bit of comfort? Something entertaining and inspirational to bring us all together. This is where I'm going to end my episode 5 part 2 review. There was nothing in this episode that moved us any closer toward the overall story of The Wheel of Time. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. I want to thank all of my new subscribers. I am incredibly grateful, and I thank you for your support. As ever, this is Salty Texas Sea. I am Corey DB. The weekend is upon us. I hope you have a good, mellow, fun time. Take care.